Joined now by the other side of the aisle, Democrat from Massachusetts, Senator John Kerry. Welcome here. Good to have you in the studio as well.
Delighted to be here.
So look, the big news is tax cuts, unemployment benefits. Senator McConnell was careful in his language, but seems to be suggesting a deal is at hand. Where are we?
Well, David, I think that there will be an agreement because yesterday's vote made it very, very clear this enormous divide between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Republicans are fighting to keep in place a tax policy that has failed over the last 8 years. It has failed. We have had a net loss of jobs, and what we've seen is a Republican Party that's absolutely prepared to deny unemployment insurance to people who've been laid off, who can't pay their bills, who want to, put food on the table for their families. They've said no. We're willing to hold that hostage so that we can give the wealthiest people in the country a bonus tax cut. And what I mean by that is, people aren't focused on the fact that under the Democratic proposal, everybody in America got a tax cut. The wealthiest people in America got a tax cut, up to the $250,000 of income. What they're fighting for is to give those people who earn more than $1 million a year a bonus tax cut above that, even though it's the least effective way of creating jobs and putting impact into the economy.
But, Senator, isn't it true that the president's own economic advisors have said to him at this juncture, look, you may feel like you've drawn a line in the sand, no extension on the tax cuts for wealthier Americans, but uncertainty right now in the economy means that you could lose more jobs. You could have a worsening job situation if you don't, you don't extend these tax cuts for now, for a temporary period.
We want to extend the tax cuts for every single American, but up to a level that makes sense in terms of our economy. You talk about uncertainty of the economy. How much uncertainty is there to our economy when you add $800 billion to the deficit?
But the president seems willing to deal, is the point. I mean, there may be a disagreement about this still, but he seems willing to deal.
I think it's critical for people to understand what the Republican, how bankrupt, how fundamentally reckless their position is and has been. And the fact is, let me go a little bigger here for a minute. Our country is challenged economically as never before. People talk about American exceptionalism and how there's sort of this automatic for America. Yes, we are exceptional, but we're exceptional when we do exceptional things, when we behave exceptionally. We're not doing that today. We're locked down into a gridlock status where other countries are racing by us. I'll give you an example. Over the next 20 years, $600 billion is going to be invested in green technology and green energy. New jobs that could be for Americans. 90% of that investment is going to be in other countries, David.
Led by the Chinese.
By the Chinese and by a lot of other people. 2 years ago, China produced 5% of the world's solar panels. Today, they produce 60%. We're not even in the game. We invented this technology at the Bell Laboratories 50 years ago. We don't have one company in the top 10 companies of the world. Shame on us. The point I'm making is that you can't just talk about American exceptionalism and then sit around and feed the frenzy of this tax cut at the upper end. You've got to invest in America's future.
But, a lot of viewers will look at this, especially liberals, Senator, and they'll say, absolutely right. Senator Kerry's got it exactly right. Then why is the president caving to the Republicans?
He's not.
Wait a minute, but what is the political fallout if the president makes a deal where he might get an extension of unemployment benefits, but all of these tax cuts are extended for a period of time, including on the wealthy Americans?
Let me tell you what the president is fighting for, and appropriately. And first of all, the president's not caving. The president insisted that we have the votes that we have yesterday so that America could see what the Republicans are fighting for. And they could see what we're fighting for. His preferred position is $250,000. Give every American a tax cut up to $250,000. But don't put money back into the pockets of people who may never invest it in the United States. I mean, if you're earning more than $1 million a year, that investment, when you give that tax cut, you get about a 30-cent return on the dollar given. If you give unemployment insurance, you get $1.60 back on the dollar that you put in. There are multiplier effects that are a reality of our economic laws. The Republicans are ignoring them in order just to feed that upper end. And they're willing to hold unemployment compensation hostage to that desire to give a bonus tax
but you also heard that there may be a deal on that as well.
Let's say there's a deal. Here's the problem. You just had the minority leader sitting here for whatever period of time, and all he talked about was the need to come to them. All he talked about was if they can do something that makes us comfortable. That's not how you compromise. They need to have a little discomfort, just as we have a little discomfort.
So what does the president do to create that discomfort? Would you not agree that politically the problem for the president has been he has done nothing to make the Republicans uncomfortable?
Just a minute, David. Let me take you on that. The President of the United States came into office with a president who'd left him with a $5 trillion add-on to the debt of this country, an unprecedented financial crisis. The fact is that the TARP that we passed, that everybody hates, they hate the word, they hate the concept, it saved countless numbers of jobs in this country. The Recovery Act saved millions of jobs in this country and brought our financial system back from the brink. Wall Street ought to be singing this president's praises. We've had a 60% increase in the stock market in 2 years. How often does that happen? You have $3 trillion increase in the net value of the Fortune 500 companies. $3 trillion increase in 2 years. Under George Bush in 8 years, it only increased by several hundred billion. You've had the HIRE Act. The Republicans opposed it. It created hundreds of thousands of jobs. The Recovery Act, the Small Business Act.
I know that, but I'm asking you a political question, which is where do you create the discomfort? I mean, you know the game here. As a senator, you've run for president. You know the pressure points in Washington.
Let me tell you point blank. Here's what the president's doing. The president is fighting to get unemployment insurance that they have held hostage. This is the point. People need to focus in America. The Republicans have been willing to hold unemployment insurance hostage to this bonus tax cut that has the least impact and adds to the deficit. And the phony recklessness of their position is this. They've said for months, we can't give you unemployment compensation because it's unpaid for and it will add to the deficit. But yesterday they were willing to vote for a $4 trillion increase that wipes out everything the debt commission is doing in order to give a tax cut to the wealthiest people. Now, the president's prepared to compromise, to get unemployment insurance, to get the work for pay tax cut, to get a child care credit tax cut, to get additional tax cuts that go to average people and will create jobs. But he wants to do more than that. And this is the most important difference between us and them. The Republican agenda is tax cut and cut spending. We cannot cut our way to competition with these other countries. If we're going to be a great power, if we're going to project in the world, if we're going to put America back to work and be part of this $6 trillion market that is the new energy market of the future with 6 billion users, we need to invest in America's future.
All right.
And the president is fighting to get an infrastructure development effort in America so we regrow our own country. He's fighting for an energy policy that they fought against all last year and delayed and delayed and delayed, even though we made compromise after compromise, and I know that because I was negotiating it. And we need R&D, we need science, technology, engineering, math. We need to kick America into gear. This is our Sputnik moment. We've sort of seen Sputnik going across the sky, but we've done nothing similar to what we did in the 1960s to respond to it.
I want to get you on a couple of other matters here that are very important. I want to start with WikiLeaks. You heard Senator McConnell say this is a high-tech terrorist. Secretary Gates, Defense Secretary, of course, had a slightly different view of what the fallout actually is. And this is what he said this week. I want to show it.
Now, I've heard the impact of these releases on our foreign policy described as a meltdown, as a game changer, and so on. I think those descriptions are fairly significantly overwrought. The fact is, governments deal with the United States because it's in their interest, not because they like us, not because they trust us, and not because they believe we can keep secrets.
Do you disagree with that in terms of what the damage done here is?
I think there is damage. It may be a little bit more profound than the Secretary. I don't think it goes to the extent that some people have been saying, but yes, there is real damage. Social Security numbers of individuals have been made public. Technology about roadside bombs has been made public. The relationship of a president, let's say, of Yemen, who is involved with us in helping to fight domestic terror in Yemen, has been exposed for parts of his relationship with the United States that could be very damaging to our efforts there. There are many similar kinds of efforts. In Germany, some people are calling for the return of the ambassador. In other places, they won't talk to some of our people for a while. This hurts I think this.
Will some ambassadors be removed from countries?
I can't tell you, but it's possible that in some places people are going to say they can't work with them. And they'll say that quietly and behind the scenes. David, you know, I was very much involved back in the days when the Pentagon Papers came out. This has no relationship to something like that. This is voyeurism. This is sort of an anarchical kind of act by someone who wants attention that is not revealing some truth about a government lying or a policy that's been misled. This is just letting people in on the inside of something where it has great ability to undo our ability to protect the interests of our country.
I want to ask you finally, this is a bigger topic than we can get into all the details of, but I want to ask you about Afghanistan. The president visiting the troops there this week in a surprise visit. And when we talk about our goals, all of the concerns about Hamid Karzai, the Afghan leader, questions about corruptions and so forth, and it takes me back to a famous moment before you were senator, April 1971, when you said this on Capitol Hill about Vietnam.
How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake?
My question to you as you look at the landscape of our withdrawal plans in 2014, is it a mistake in Afghanistan to ask soldiers to be the last to die in a war that may not be able to achieve the results that we have laid out for it?
Well, first of all, I just looked at that and I said, boy, he needs a haircut. Look, in my judgment, Afghanistan is just not Vietnam. We shouldn't have been in Vietnam. It was a surrogate war. It was a civil war. It was a Cold War, surrogate war. There were any number of reasons why it was a gigantic mistake. In Afghanistan, we're there for a purpose. Now, I don't believe we need the size of the footprint doing everything we're doing, and I've said that many times publicly, and I don't think the president, in the long run, wants to do that, which is why he has committed to this transition. I believe the president and our military and our policy is on the right track, and that track is to turn this over to the Afghans as rapidly as possible in a way that meets their needs to have sufficient stability and capacity to survive.
Can we do that before 2014?
And our needs to be able to prosecute counterterrorism efforts. I think you can do a lot of counterterrorism with a smaller footprint and still manage the progress of Afghanistan. And most of that, in my judgment, will depend on what we're succeeding in doing in Pakistan. Pakistan is as much the key to the outcome in Afghanistan as anything else. Now, can we do it by 2014? Yes, I believe we can. And I think the president is absolutely intent on preventing this from being the mistake that begged the question that I posed in 1971.
We will leave it there. Senator Kerry, thank you very much, as always.